So flowing through this presentation today is an idea about connection, collaboration and creativity. It's a city with art at its heart, and it becomes out of a vital wellspring of learning. We think learning, whether informal or informal, whether in the street or in the classroom, is ultimately what will bring life back to town. And we're talking, therefore, about learning as a state of being, learning as a state of mind. When you're observing art in practice, when you go to an exhibition, when you see a show, you're learning. Learning will be what gives us our life back. So the city we build, the city that we rebuild, must have at its base creativity and learning. Without arts, without the art stuff that happens around the arts, like shopping and food and great coffee and places to see people and places to rent good movies and places to go and see good movies for that matter. Without all of those things, the things that reach out to the diverse communities that we have around us, we can build beautiful structures, we can create beautiful green spaces, but it's no good if nobody wants to stay there. And the thing that keeps people staying there is not just the structures, it's the cultural structures. It's the life that goes through those from the people that we're talking about today, our artists, our performers, our designers, our creators. We've got to take our city back, Christchurch, and we need to make a stand. We need to give ourselves back a city that has the best of what we used to have, but in a better way than what we had it. And we think that what we're talking about here, a creative precinct centred out of CPIT, based around that part of the southern part of the city, is a way that we can truly make that happen. And we'd like to thank you for your attention and invite your questions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin and Greg. Right, we'll do some running with the microphone. We'll start over here because you missed out last time. So feel free to raise your hand if you've got a question. Okay. We'll move over to the centre zone then. Just raise your hand if you've got a question, just so we've got an indication from the outset. Okay, we'll start here. Cheers.
Well, my question is, how do you attract new students in this current environment, given the fact that it's going to take a number of years before you get to where you want to be?
Well, that's a big question for us as an organisation, and we're spending an awful lot of time thinking about it. For us, we're actually on our campus trying to microcosmically build a student experience that in some way is attractive. We already attract students with unique learning opportunities that we offer, but we also need to make sure that our cultural, our social and our recreational facilities can actually still keep them going while we don't have life past St. Asaph Street. But on the other hand, we think this is a chance as well for temporary solutions to what we're talking about, and we know that our arts organisations out there desperately need a place now. If we haven't got a studio for an artist, a place for an orchestra to rehearse, a place for a theatre company to perform soon, really, really soon, there's nothing to keep those people here. And as I said, that's the vortex right up there, and it's sucking them up. Students, performers, and ultimately our population.
You've talked about collection and collaboration. I'm just wondering how your vision could work in with all the talk of wanting to bring the university into the centre of town and the School of Fine Arts.
Oh, do you want to answer that, or you want me to? Okay. We would welcome that very proposition, and we would love to have that conversation. Obviously, it's not our decision, but we think that as an alignment of education provision around the arts and around cultural is actually a great idea.
Yeah, as an epic city, I mean, if we were a portal for education, say in performing arts, or, I mean, what a wonderful opportunity. I mean, that's a real opportunity there for us to take.
As someone who's taught at CPIT in the past, I find your presentation very exciting. It reminds me of the way in which what is known now in Paris as the Latin Quarter grew in the Middle Ages around a university and brought to Paris, you know, the medieval equivalent of the bars, cafes, and restaurants that we'd like to have back in the central city, as a sort of precinct. But also, in addition to the arts and the creative side of what CPIT does, is the technological side, and it's worth remembering that one of the most prestigious institutions of learning in the United States has Institute of Technology rather than university as part of its name. So how would you see what you're presenting as a precinct growing out of arts and culture, marrying into the idea of CPIT also as a centre of technological development?
It's a very good question. If I could sum it up this way, for students that are looking to come and study with us, we can say, here is our art department, here's our welding department, here's the cafe, here's the library. Or we can say to them, come with us and look at the kind of collaborations that you could be involved with. You could be working for trades and engineering, you could be working in architecture, and actually involved in some of the civic rebuild going on over the next few years. And that is a collaborative process. I mean, you need architects, you need fabricators, you need the graphic designers to promote it, you need the web designers to talk about it online, you need the communicators to actually sell the story. So essentially it's an integrated delivery, and CPIT are looking to engage on across all levels, and they will be linked together.
Interested in the, let's say, the commercial part of the CPIT. It's a great institution, and that's fine. I'm concerned with the constant referral to it as a precinct, because we're talking about the inner city and the whole of the inner city. And I wonder whether, I'd be interested to hear your comment on CPIT, or I would rather broaden it to all of the creative arts, education and so on, as in a linear concept rather than a precinct concept. People would have to go to the CPIT in order to enjoy the benefits of it. But don't you think that they could be spread right throughout the central city area instead of having one hub of arts education, creative education, have a linear one that stretches right through the city?
Okay.
One thing I'll answer to that is a hub needs spokes. I mean, it's a hub because it has spokes from it. So I think in terms of the hub component, there's a kind of a critical mass that comes from co-locating people, which we can see financially and experientially and creatively, if you like. But I agree we need those links to the other parts of the city as well.
All right, we'll come down here. Can you raise your hands if you've got any questions over there, just so we know? Okay, we'll come to you at the end.
Here.
Yep. And then we'll just work down. Yep. It's you.
Your vision is very, very commendable. But what I see is a concentration of all the performing arts in one place, which is just on the edge of the central city. What about the arts precinct, which is already there around the art gallery and in the middle of the city? You want to just leave that cold without the performing arts, without the music or whatever. I think that people will renege against going all the way to the edge all the time.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you for that. What we would like to be really clear about is that this is not an either-or proposition. This is an and. Here we have emerging, over here we have establishment, over here we have avant-garde. There's a whole lot of things that they don't have to be necessarily performed in one space, but and we're not talking about a big singular building. I need to make that really clear. This is not, we were reported in the Listener recently as wanting a Barbican. We kind of would like a Barbican, but not in its brutalist, monumental style. We want a Barbican state of mind. We want people to think together and share some of the back-end stuff, but not necessarily confine themselves to, you know, the block between St. Asaph Street and Mackenzie and Willis's Corner. It's not that. It's all of those things, but it's about how we do them.
All right, we'll come down here.
A lot of us are concerned with aesthetic architectural standards. I know that's a big question, but can you give us some thoughts, comments on that?
Yes, that's a very good, interesting question. One of the things that we've been trying to say quite clearly is that that process to actually define what the places and the spaces look like needs to take some time. We need to, I think, provide a very quick response to address some of the creative and performing needs, the audience needs, the kind of the city's needs around this creative precinct idea now, and do so in a way that gives us time to actually address that question collectively and sensibly. We don't sort of want to say this is what it will look like physically necessarily. That's a bit further down the track, I think.
Maybe what we could say is if we want to inspire good art, we need to have inspiring spaces for that to be inspired from. So, you know, let's not settle for a tilt slab building here. We need to think and give some thought to exactly what would do that kind of work.
Thank you. My main concern is when you look at the statistics, about 20% of the young people are unemployed. So I was just wondering where people are getting employed from attending Polytech at the moment, where you're having success stories. Then the other statistic is the baby boomers getting old and having sort of a lot of people not working, whether they're young or old people retired. So I just wondered how you see it economically stacking up for everyone.
Let's see, let's unpick that one. I think for a start, the students that come onto our programs, and admittedly not all of them, but for the most of them in the creative industries, get work if they want it. We have very high placement rates. So if they get through onto our programs, then they get employed, they get work. So that's the first thing. The second, the baby boomers, as you say, make up what I would consider to be quite a large part of the consumer market, if you like, for some of the arts. In terms of how we basically make sure that this whole model works economically, I think this is where we have to start looking at the other partners and the other components of this rebuild that would actually benefit from drawing people in, because that's, I think, a key ingredient. We need to be drawing people to us. It's not simply replacing what we had. It's actually providing something that's bigger and better, building on what we had. And so it becomes more of an economical powerhouse. I think it's also important to state that, look, the arts are often considered to be uneconomic. And I give you WOW as an example in Wellington of how that's pretty much single-handedly turned the city around in its perception. And if you look at models across different cities in the world, in Vancouver, for example, they have built a whole economic case around creative industries. I think it's possible. We just have to seize that challenge. It is a challenge, though.
Righto, last question. Ma'am.
I was just wondering if any ideas have been, or who's responsible for the ideas of putting up temporary art spaces that you were alluding to. Is it for your institution, or is it going to be the council, or?
It's in conjunction with the people that we've been talking with, our partners. We're looking at providing some temporary spaces, art spaces for artists. There's really not a lot of stuff there right now. So we're kind of acting as a filter, if you like, and a motivating force to help build these things. So we're in the process of developing at the moment, and hopefully within the next 2 or 3 months we'll have them available for use. Does that answer your question?
She's happy. Martin and Jane, thank you very much. A warm round of applause for Martin Trusttrum and Jane Gregg.